The champagne flute shattered against the marble floor, sending crystal shards scattering across the ballroom like tiny diamonds. A sound that made every one of the 300 guests freeze mid-conversation. Marcus Ashford, tech billionaire and groom-to-be, stood at the entrance of the Plaza Hotel's grand ballroom. His face drained of all color, staring at a woman in a simple navy dress who had just walked through the door. "What are you doing here?" The words escaped his lips in a whisper that somehow carried across the entire silent room. "Hey everyone, before we dive deeper into this story, drop a comment and let me know where you're watching from. And if you're enjoying this, hit that subscribe button. Trust me, you won't want to miss how this ends." Marcus Ashford had everything figured out. At 38, he'd built CloudSync Technologies from a dorm room idea into a $12 billion empire. His penthouse overlooked Central Park. His garage housed a collection of vintage Ferraris. And in 2 days, he would marry Vanessa Sterling, Manhattan socialite, Yale graduate, and the woman every magazine called the perfect match for New York's most eligible bachelor. "You look nervous," Vanessa said, appearing beside him on the terrace of their rehearsal dinner at Daniel, one of Manhattan's most exclusive restaurants. She looked stunning in a white Chanel dress, her blonde hair swept into an elegant updo. "Cold feet already?" Marcus forced a smile and wrapped his arm around her waist. "Just thinking about how lucky I am." "That's the right answer." She kissed his cheek, leaving a perfect lipstick imprint. "Oh, I meant to tell you. I added one more guest to the list, an old friend of yours from college. Sarah Chin? She reached out last week, said she was in town and would love to catch up. I thought it would be a sweet surprise." The name hit Marcus like a punch to the gut. "Sarah Chen. Yes, you two knew each other at MIT, right? She seemed lovely over email. Very excited to see you again." Vanessa squeezed his hand. "I should go check on the seating arrangements. Love you." As she walked away, Marcus gripped the terrace railing so hard his knuckles went white. Sarah Chen. He hadn't heard that name in 15 years. Hadn't allowed himself to think about her in almost as long. His phone buzzed. Unknown number. "We need to talk before Saturday. It's important." Marcus deleted the message, his hand shaking. 15 years ago. MIT junior year. Marcus had been a scholarship kid from Queens, working 3 part-time jobs while carrying a full course load in computer science. Sarah had been in his algorithms class, brilliant, funny, with a laugh that could light up the entire lecture hall. She'd grown up in San Francisco's Chinatown, the daughter of immigrants who ran a small restaurant. They'd fallen in love over late-night coding sessions and cheap pizza. She was the one who believed in him when CloudSync was just scribbled notes in a worn notebook. The one who helped him write his first business plan. The one who stayed up with him for 72 hours straight when he was debugging the prototype that would eventually make him rich. "We're going to change the world together," Sarah had said one night, her head resting on his shoulder as they watched the sunrise from the roof of the computer science building. "You and me against everything." But then came the offers. The venture capitalists, the Silicon Valley meetings, and the choice. Build the company in California where the money was, or stay on the East Coast where Sarah had been accepted to Harvard Law School. "Come with me," Marcus had pleaded. "Defer for a year. This is our dream." "It's your dream," Sarah had said quietly, tears streaming down her face. "And I love you enough to let you chase it. But I have dreams too, Marcus. My parents sacrificed everything for me to have opportunities they never had. I can't throw that away." "So that's it? You're choosing law school over us." "I'm not choosing law school over us. I'm asking you to choose us over California. We can make this work here. Plenty of startups succeed on the East Coast." But Marcus had already made up his mind. The money, the momentum, the opportunity, it was all in Silicon Valley. He'd left 3 days later, promising to make it work long distance, promising to fly back every month. He'd kept that promise for exactly 6 weeks before the distance, the time zones, and the pressure became too much. The breakup had been messy, painful, and final. Sarah had sent back the promise ring he'd given her along with a letter he'd never had the courage to open. Marcus stood in the groom's suite, adjusting his Tom Ford tuxedo for the 100th time. His best man, David watched him with concern. Dude, you're sweating through your shirt. What's going on? Nothing. I'm fine. You're not fine. You've been weird since the rehearsal dinner. Is this about Vanessa? Because if you're having doubts, I'm not having doubts. But even as Marcus said it, he knew it was a lie. He was marrying Vanessa because she was perfect on paper. She fit into his world effortlessly. She never challenged him, never pushed him to be better, never made him feel like he was missing something fundamental. She was everything Sarah wasn't. And maybe that was exactly the problem. His phone buzzed again. Another unknown number. I'm here. We really need to talk. Please. Last chance. Marcus stared at the message. He could ignore it. Walk down that aisle. Marry Vanessa. Live the life everyone expected him to live. Or he could finally face the past he'd been running from for 15 years. Which brings us back to that shattered champagne glass. Sarah stood at the entrance in her navy dress, looking exactly the same and completely different all at once. Her hair was shorter now, streaked with a few strands of premature gray. She wore glasses. There were lines around her eyes that hadn't been there before. But her expression, determined, scared, heartbroken, brave, was achingly familiar. Marcus, she said, walking toward him as the crowd parted like the Red Sea. I'm sorry. I know this is crazy. But I couldn't let you do this without knowing the truth. Vanessa appeared at his side, her face a mask of polite confusion rapidly shifting toward anger. What is happening right now? Marcus, who is this? I'm Sarah Chun, Sarah said, her voice steady despite the trembling of her hands. And 15 years ago, I made the biggest mistake of my life by letting Marcus walk away. The room erupted in whispers. Marcus felt like he was drowning. This is insane, Vanessa hissed. Security. Someone call security. Wait. The word came from Marcus, surprising even himself. Just wait. He looked at Sarah, really looked at her, for the first time in 15 years. Why now? Why here? Sarah reached into her purse and pulled out an envelope. The envelope. The one that had come with his returned promise ring all those years ago. Did you ever read my letter? She asked. No. I figured. She handed it to him. Maybe you should. Marcus's hands shook as he opened the envelope that had haunted him for 15 years. The paper was yellowed with age, the ink slightly faded. But Sarah's handwriting was unmistakable. Dear Marcus, I'm sending back your ring, but not because I don't love you. I'm sending it back because loving you means letting you chase your dream without guilt or regret. By the time you read this, you'll have already left for California. And I'll have made a decision I should have told you about weeks ago. But I was too scared of what it would mean, of how it would change everything. Marcus, I'm pregnant. The letter fell from his hands. The room spun. He couldn't breathe. Sarah's eyes filled with tears. I tried to tell you so many times. But you were so focused on the company, so caught up in the opportunity. And then we fought, and you left, and I was angry and hurt and terrified. By the time I found the courage to call you, you'd already moved on. I saw the pictures of you at Silicon Valley parties with investors and models and people from a world I'd never belonged to. So I made a choice. What choice? Marcus could barely form the words. I raised our daughter on my own. Her name is Emma. She's 14 years old. And she's incredible, Marcus. She's brilliant and funny, and she has your eyes and your brain for mathematics. She codes in her sleep. Last month, she won the National Computer Science Olympiad. Marcus sank into the nearest chair. The room around him had ceased to exist. There was only Sarah, her words, and the earth-shattering revelation that somewhere in the world, he had a 14-year-old daughter he'd never met. Why? He whispered. Why didn't you tell me? Pride, fear, stupidity. Take your pick. Sarah wiped her tears away. But Emma started asking questions this year. Real questions. About who her father was and why he wasn't in her life. I couldn't lie to her anymore. And then I saw the announcement about your wedding. And I realized I couldn't let another day go by without you knowing the truth. Vanessa's voice cut through the silence like a knife. This is absolutely ridiculous. Some woman shows up with a wild story on our wedding day, and you're actually entertaining this? Marcus, tell her to leave. But Marcus wasn't looking at Vanessa. He was staring at Sarah, seeing their whole past rewritten in his mind. Where is she? Emma. Where is she now? She's outside, Sarah said quietly. In the lobby. I didn't know if you'd want to meet her, but she insisted on coming. She wanted to see you, even if it was just from a distance. Marcus was on his feet before he'd consciously decided to move. He walked past Vanessa, past the shocked guests, past his parents and Vanessa's parents and everyone who had come to celebrate a wedding that suddenly felt like a lie. In the plaza's lobby, sitting on a velvet bench and fidgeting with a phone, was a teenage girl in a blue dress. She had Sarah's cheekbones and dark hair, but when she looked up at the sound of his approaching footsteps, Marcus saw his own eyes staring back at him. Emma stood up slowly, her face a mixture of hope and terror. Hi, she said, her voice barely audible. I'm Emma. Marcus tried to speak, but his voice broke. 14 years. He'd missed 14 years. First steps and first words and first days of school. Soccer games and science fairs and all the tiny moments that make up a childhood. Gone. Lost forever because of pride and fear and the stupid choices two heartbroken 21-year-olds had made. I'm so sorry, he managed to say. I didn't know. I swear, I didn't know. I know, Emma said. Mom told me everything. She said you would have come if you'd known. That you weren't the kind of person who would just abandon us. She was right. I would have been there. I would have been there for everything. Emma smiled, tentative, fragile, but real. Mom says it's not too late, that we can't change the past, but we can choose what happens next. Marcus looked back toward the ballroom where 300 people were waiting for him to return, where Vanessa was probably plotting his murder, where the life he'd carefully constructed was falling apart. Then he looked at Emma, his daughter, and realized that life had never been as real as this moment. Your mom's a smart woman, he said. She always was. 3 months later, the small apartment in Brooklyn was nothing like Marcus's penthouse, but Emma had insisted on seeing where her mom had raised her. Sarah's place was cozy, filled with books and Emma's artwork and photographs documenting 14 years of a life Marcus was only now beginning to understand. So let me get this straight, Emma said, sitting cross-legged on the floor surrounded by Chinese takeout containers. You left Mom for Silicon Valley, made billions of dollars, almost married a woman you didn't really love, and then I crashed your wedding like some kind of movie cliché? That's a pretty accurate summary, Marcus admitted, laughing despite himself. And now you and Mom are… What? Dating? It's kind of weird. Sarah, sitting beside Marcus on the couch, smiled. Your dad and I are taking things slowly. We're not the same people we were 15 years ago. We need to get to know each other again. But you still love each other, Emma said matter-of-factly. Anyone can see that. Marcus and Sarah exchanged a glance. It was true. The love had never really gone away. It had just been buried under layers of hurt and regret and time. These past 3 months of family dinners and long conversations and slowly rebuilding trust had proven that. What about Vanessa? Emma asked. Is she, like, super mad? Vanessa is engaged to a hedge fund manager, Marcus said. Last I heard, the wedding's planned for next spring. I think she's much happier. And you sold your company? Not the whole thing. But I stepped down as CEO and sold most of my shares. I'm starting something new. Something smaller. Here in New York. So I can actually have a life outside of work. Emma grinned. Mom says you're taking me to the father-daughter coding camp next month. Wouldn't miss it. Marcus felt his throat tighten with emotion. I've missed enough already. Sarah reached over and squeezed his hand. It was such a simple gesture, but it felt like coming home after 15 years of being lost. You know what the crazy thing is? Marcus said. I spent 15 years building an empire, trying to prove I'd made the right choice. But I was just running away from the only choice that ever really mattered. Which was? Emma asked. Marcus looked at Sarah, then at their daughter, brilliant, brave Emma, who had existed in the world for 14 years without him and who was somehow gracious enough to give him a second chance. Choosing love, he said simply. Choosing family. Choosing to be present for the people who matter instead of chasing some idea of success that leaves you empty inside. Emma nodded thoughtfully, then reached for another spring roll. That's deep, Dad. Very Hallmark movie. But also kind of true. Dad. The word hit Marcus like a freight train every single time. He'd never get tired of hearing it. Sarah leaned her head on his shoulder. For what it's worth, I'm sorry too. I should have told you about Emma from the beginning. We both made mistakes. Yeah, Marcus agreed. But maybe we can stop making them now. Outside the apartment window, Brooklyn glowed in the evening light. Somewhere across the city, in that penthouse overlooking Central Park, Marcus's old life existed like a memory of someone else's dream. But here, in this modest apartment that smelled like Chinese food and sounded like laughter, surrounded by the family he'd never known he had. This was real. This was everything. The tech blogs were savage about Marcus Ashford's fall from grace. Billionaire abandons company for baby mama drama. One headline screamed, Marcus Ashford, from tech god to deadbeat dad, declared another. But Marcus had stopped reading the headlines. He was too busy helping Emma with her computer science homework. Too busy rebuilding a relationship with the woman he'd never stopped loving. Too busy actually living his life instead of just accumulating achievements. On a Saturday morning 6 months after the wedding that never happened, Marcus sat in Sarah's kitchen, watching Emma explain her latest coding project. Something about machine learning algorithms that went over his head but filled him with incredible pride. You know what? Emma said, pausing mid-explanation. I'm glad you didn't get married that day. Yeah, Marcus asked. Why's that? Because then I wouldn't have gotten my dad back. And Mom wouldn't be smiling all the time. And we wouldn't be here, eating Mom's terrible pancakes. Hey, Sarah protested, flicking water at Emma from the sink. And planning our trip to Comic-Con next month. Emma grinned. This is better. This is what a family's supposed to feel like. Marcus felt tears prick his eyes for what must have been the 100th time in 6 months. You're right, sweetheart. This is exactly what it's supposed to feel like. That evening, after Emma had gone to her room to work on her project, Marcus and Sarah sat on the small balcony, watching the sun set over Brooklyn. Do you ever regret it? Sarah asked quietly. Giving up everything you built? Marcus thought about it, really thought about it. The company, the money, the penthouses and Ferraris and magazine covers. All the things he'd thought defined success. I didn't give up everything, he said finally. I just figured out what everything actually meant. He pulled out a small box from his pocket. Not the expensive Tiffany ring he'd planned to give Vanessa, but something simpler, more meaningful. The promise ring he'd given Sarah 15 years ago, freshly polished and resized. Sarah Chun, he said, opening the box. I was an idiot when I was 21. I chose ambition over love, and I lost 15 years with you and Emma because of it. I can't get those years back. But if you'll have me, if you'll give me another chance, I promise I'll never make that mistake again. Sarah's eyes filled with tears. Marcus Ashford, are you proposing to me on my balcony in Brooklyn while wearing sweatpants? Yes, I am. Is that okay? She laughed through her tears. It's perfect. You're perfect. And yes, you idiot. Yes. As Marcus slipped the ring onto her finger, Emma's voice floated out from her bedroom window. Finally, I've been waiting for this for months. Can I be the maid of honor? They both burst out laughing. Through the window, they could see Emma doing a victory dance with her headphones on, completely oblivious to the fact that they could see her. Our daughter has zero chill, Sarah said. Our daughter, Marcus repeated, loving the sound of it. God, I love saying that. Get used to it. You're going to be saying it for the rest of your life. That's the plan. They sat together as the sun disappeared behind the Brooklyn skyline. Two people who had loved and lost and found each other again. Who had learned the hard way that success means nothing if you're measuring it against the wrong things. 15 years ago, Marcus Ashford had walked away from love to chase a dream. Today he realized that all along, love had been the dream. Everything else was just noise. And sometimes, If you're lucky enough and brave enough and willing to let a stranger crash your wedding with the truth you've been running from, you get a second chance to get it right. Thank you for watching. If you enjoyed the story, don't forget to subscribe and leave a comment about your favorite part. What would you have done in Marcus's shoes? Let me know below.